History doesn't always change through revolutions. Sometimes it changes through accounting. Britain didn't transform because of a war or a scandal. It transformed because of a single decision that cost and earned roughly $6 million a day. No riots broke out, no sirens wailed, no headline called it destiny. But that quiet financial choice rewired how the country spent, how it traded, how it built, how it governed, and how it imagined its place in the world. If revolutions create shock, this one created trajectory, and trajectories are harder to resist than shocks. The strangest part is how few people noticed it happening, and how many people would later blame everything except the moment that started it. To understand the decision, you have to understand the moment before it. Britain has always lived between worlds, a maritime empire turned industrial power turned financial hub. History rewarded it for agility, but agility comes with vulnerability. Economies built on speed can break quietly. Economies built on services can drift silently. Economies built on confidence can shatter without a single explosion. In the decades leading up to the $6 million a day decision, Britain's economy faced two tensions: internal strain, the cost of maintaining a modern social state, and external pressure, the demand to compete in a global market that rewarded scale and punished hesitation. These weren't narrative pressures. They were structural, and structural pressures don't ask what a country wants to be. They ask what it must become to survive. The decision itself didn't sound historical. It sounded technical, a shift in how Britain financed itself, how it priced risk, how it allocated power between government, markets, and citizens. Call it deregulation, call it privatization, call it austerity, call it fiscal discipline. The label doesn't matter, the mechanism does. The government chose to move a portion of responsibility from state to market, and to do it aggressively. The daily cost of that shift, roughly $6 million, didn't come from miscalculation. It came from design. It was the premium paid for speed and the discount earned for efficiency. A bargain that made sense in the moment, and a weapon that would shape decades. Markets are fast. Governments are slow, markets are efficient. Governments are cautious. Markets reward risk, governments fear it. When the decision moved power toward markets, something subtle happened. Policy stopped being a tool to shape the economy. Policy became a signal, a message to investors, to traders, to financial institutions. What mattered wasn't the law itself. What mattered was how markets interpreted it. Interpretation replaced intention. And interpretation is where systems begin to drift. Because once markets interpret laws, they also begin to enforce them, not legally, but economically. And economics has always been a harsher disciplinarian than politics. When states retreat, someone else must advance. Private firms took over what public institutions once managed, not through conquest, but through contract. Infrastructure, transportation, utilities, housing, communication. Sectors built for national resilience became sectors built for EBITDA. Nothing collapsed. Nothing malfunctioned. Prices simply changed. Priorities shifted. Profit replaced stability as the organizing principle. The country didn't privatize assets. It privatized risk, and risk is the most expensive thing a state can sell, because once sold, it rarely returns without crisis. By the time anyone noticed, citizens weren't just paying taxes. They were paying premiums. Economic decisions always become cultural. They just take longer. Britain didn't wake up one day believing households should manage what governments once guaranteed. It drifted there. The language changed. Investment over provision, choice over rights, competition over protection. People assumed they were gaining freedom. In reality, they were inheriting responsibility. Responsibility feels empowering when times are good. It feels isolating when times are not. The decision never explained that distinction. It didn't have to. Culture carried it for free. And culture, once it absorbs an economic framework, rarely returns it. The most expensive part of the $6 million a day decision was the lag, the gap between cause and effect. The benefits appeared quickly. Markets opened, capital flowed, services expanded, indexes rose. The costs appeared slowly, wages stagnated, inequality widened, regions diverged, social fabric frayed. Neither side felt connected. That's what makes systemic decisions so dangerous. When outcomes don't rhyme with inputs, blame becomes scattershot, and scattershot blame prevents course correction. The country couldn't adjust because it couldn't agree on what broke. And disagreements over diagnosis are more politically lethal than disagreements over solutions. Economic decisions don't just affect citizens, they affect cities. London thrived. Finance loved the decision. Global capital loved the decision. The future, or at least the version favored by investors, lived in London. But the rest of Britain felt the decision differently. Places that once manufactured goods began manufacturing resentment. Places that once exported products began exporting people. This wasn't ideological, it was geographic. When a country builds prosperity in one region and distributes austerity to another, the map becomes political. Resentment doesn't start with anger, it starts with comparison, and comparison is cheaper than revolt. Politics doesn't create economic shocks, it inherits them. As the consequences of the decision compounded, politics absorbed the frustration. But frustration isn't coherent. It doesn't point to one villain or one policy. It points to everything and nothing simultaneously. Parties tried to fix it, reforms were proposed, mandates were claimed. But mandates built on frustration rarely deliver stability. And stability is the currency politics needs most. Without it, politics becomes reactive, and reactive politics rarely returns a country to equilibrium. By the time Britain realized the scale of the decision, it wasn't a decision anymore, it was structure. You can debate policy. Structure you must endure. The market-state hybrid that emerged wasn't designed in a room. It evolved in the open, through incentives, not ideology, through drift, not revolution. The state didn't disappear. It became a guarantor rather than a provider. The market didn't conquer. It became the default setting. Defaults are more powerful than laws because they operate without permission. And structure rarely reverses itself without crisis, because crisis is the only thing more powerful than incentive. The 6 million a day cost eventually faded from headlines. Budgets adjusted. Ministers rotated. Economists debated. But the country never returned to the world that existed before the decision. Because some transformations aren't reversible, not because no one wants to reverse them, but because there's no longer any path back. You can rebuild bridges, you can renegotiate treaties, you can rewrite laws, but you cannot easily unwind culture, incentives, geography, and identity once they sink. Britain didn't break, it became something else. And what a nation becomes is always more permanent than what a nation decides. The decision that changed Britain forever didn't feel historic. It felt rational. It promised efficiency. It promised growth. It promised modernization. And in some ways, it delivered all three. But revolutions that come through modernization don't ask for consent. They ask for adaptation. And adaptation always has a price, even when the invoice arrives decades later. History rarely remembers the decision makers of quiet revolutions. It simply lives in the world they helped create. If this breakdown helped you see how a quiet financial decision can reshape a nation more permanently than any uprising, support Inside the Numbers by liking the video, sharing it with someone who thinks in systems, and subscribing for more, because the most transformative decisions aren't loud, they are efficient. And efficiency doesn't ask permission, it asks for patience.